afternoon. I want to call the Children's Trust regular meeting, March 8th, to order. And welcome everybody. It's beautiful day. And if the first item or first comment of any changes to the agenda before we have a motion.
I would like to, no changes to the agenda, but when you get to the minutes, just want to make sure in the minutes from last meeting, item 15, sponsorship policy and funding application, that we just affirmed that, voted on, but we couldn't make out a motion or a second when we listened to the tape, so we just want to affirm that as part of the minutes.
Okay. All right. So, do we have a motion for the consent agenda, the regular agenda, modifying the minutes as Colin described?
So moved.
Second. Motion second. Any discussion? Any public discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion is unanimous. And we need to go through the speech. If you are listening or watching the meeting through the webinar format, please use the raise your hand function. Simply click on the participants icon, Zoom toolbar, and look for the raise your hand button and bottom right hand side of the screen. Those of you viewing the meeting through the webinar may also comment via that chat function. If you're watching via YouTube or listening on the phone and would like to comment, please call the call-in number of 1-346-248-7799. That's 1-346-248-7799. Use the meeting ID 841-1909-9383. That's 841-1909-9383, and press star 9 to raise your hand. I would suggest that the audience call in now, even if your comments are for later for the meeting. That way you can simply raise your hand at the appropriate time. I would like to ask the staff to display the call-in information on the screen at this time. Thank you. At the last meeting, we passed a motion to allow board members to participate virtually so long as we had a quorum physically present due to the extraordinary circumstances of COVID-19. I will now call the roll and ask the clerk to verify that at least 6 members of the trust are physically present for today's meeting. Okay. You want to roll call? I can do it.
Member Surgeon?
Here.
Member Paul Smith?
Here.
Member Cornell?
Here.
Member Hart?
Here.
Vice Chair LaGuardia?
Here.
Member
Here.
Member Twombly?
I saw her earlier.
Member Wilson Bullard?
Here.
I'm here. Okay, and we do not have to do the motion thing again. So, simply. Could you kind of put up the puzzle that you have? Okay. Okay, the next person is the executive director's board.
Yep. There's a lot on the agenda, so I just want to update the board on a few things, but I'll go pretty quickly. First of all, kudos to Commissioner Cornell, who won high praise for his performance at NACO, representing Wilson County Children's Trust, so thank you.
However, Chairman Putt got him. Chairman Putt. We both served on NACO before. Yeah.
I never was on that.
Oh, just that?
I thought it was totally appropriate.
It was a pleasure.
You did a great job, so thank you. There's a lot on the agenda. We're going to have the summer RFP, which I'm sure will have a lot of discussion. We'll have an accounting services RFP, which Todd has been gracious enough to attend. And we'll have our report at the end from the Community Foundation, so it should be a pretty good meeting. I wanted to update the board on a suggestion from Dr. Cole Smith from the last meeting about updating the community. We have set a time, or in the process of scheduling a time, pinning down a date that the chair can attend also to meet with the editorial board at the Gainesville Sun, and then we'll also, we're entertaining the idea of writing a separate column as well for them. So we'll try that first and see how that works, if that's okay. Dr. Labarda and I have, we're starting to plan out how we're going to meet as a governance committee, so that's started. We don't have a meeting scheduled yet, but we've had a conversation on what that might look like. And at the last meeting, we approved some applications for match and sponsorships. We've had some applications for match, and we're working through 2 of those, and so I would expect that possibly by the next meeting, we may have some recommendations for the trust to approve. I also got 3 separate inquiries about the YDRPP report that was presented at the last meeting, all 3 independently, around requests for information regarding heat maps or information on the heat maps or the sites that made up the information on the heat maps. And I wanted to just, as best as I can, explain why we don't have that yet, but why we're working on it. It has to do with the research design, and the information about the sites was collected in a format that also extracted, I guess, I don't know if that's the best word, but information from agencies around how they felt about the trust's RFP process. And so and those survey sessions were presented to the, I guess, subjects in research, human subjects, that they would be confidential. And so because of the way that was designed, it was the position of the YDRPP that at least some of that information to be shared with us would have to be done in such a way as that the people that responded to the survey couldn't be identified in the place they represented. Not all of the information was gathered that way. They had multiple sources. So we're working through what they think they can give us, and some of it was our information. So at least some of that list came from agencies that already had contracts with the trust, so some of it we already do know. And then the rest of it, we're trying to see if we can get in such a way that it's de-identified, and hopefully by the next meeting, I'll be able to share exactly what we worked out, so.
Yeah, I guess I was one of the people who had a question about that, and basically I thought at some level we were going to get a who's out there in the world now by area, so that we would know, and we'll talk about it, I guess, during the RFP, the zip codes and such, but I thought I was going to come away with some sort of a list of what's out there. I wasn't asking for specifics about who said what on the survey. I understand how that would be something they would want to protect so they could get honest feedback. I was much more just, I had hoped we would have some starting point of what's available where and what kinds of summer programming they do. So that was the gist of what I was hoping to get.
I was one of the people as well, and it was in the same area of, I mean, I'm now getting access to funding where we could actually collaborate with the school district, and to be able to just have, you know, the address and contact information for these organizations would be a huge step forward to take on this initiative.
And I was the 3rd one. So we're all known now.
Some of us are.
Well, and I thought that was part of the proposal
Right.
that was there. They responded to, that they would give us that information of who's out there, so that we would not be starting from scratch. If, you know, when we're sending out like the RFP, we're getting ready to do a funding now for summer programming. We have some providers I recognize here that are attending the meeting, and I think for us as a trust, it would be good just to know who's out there and where they're located. But then we maybe have to push out info, and that would be a good starting point. So I am I'm disappointed that we didn't get a listing of just the providers and location and contact info for them, so we didn't have to come. I'm disappointed that we're having to ask for that, but I was the other person, and I just think it's just useful for the trust and me as a school board member as well, so.
Well, and, I mean, if my memory is correct, I mean, we were talking that there's, 3,000 available seats this summer. I mean, if that has something to do with, like, capacity, financially as well as, like, facility, in, as a school district, that would be nice information to have, because I think we can scale this up. And I can tell you now, I look at the summer recovery, and next year's recovery is pretty important, so we are like right at that place with that information. Would be very handy.
Noted.
Thank you.
The last thing I wanted to point out in your packet is at the very, very end, there are some notes from the City of Gainesville's workshop. They're having a series of youth development workshops. In the course of those workshops, they're eliciting feedback from students, providers, the trust. We were workshop number 1, and they have one more coming up, and I forgot the subject matter, but I think sometimes there's an impression that governments aren't working together and aren't collaborating, and I want you to know that that's not true. I've asked them to share the notes of those meetings so we can incorporate it. I think what you'll hear is that a lot of the feedback they gave, you're going to hear some very similar feedback later today. The other thing that I thought was interesting, just my observation, is that the kids were very civic-minded at the city commission. They, were asked to give input about what they wanted, but instead they started talking about things about the whole community, from fixing potholes to affordable housing and everything in between. So it was really nice to see. I'm not going to take up any more time because we have a packed agenda, but for me, Mr. Chair, I would like to, as far as my report, the next item I would go to would be the accounting services RFP.
Okay, all right. So do you want to present on that?
Yeah, so I'll give, first of all, I'd like to welcome Todd Hutchinson. We don't make him show up that much, but he's been providing all our back office support for our financial services this year, and has given us plenty of lead time to help us transition for October 1st. So our goal is to probably have a contract awarded by July 1 to give us 3 months to transition. And what the board has to approve, according to our policies, is the terms of the agreement, the scope of service, the evaluation criteria, and the review team. So the item starts on page 107. And Todd, we spent some time going through the specifics of the scope. Is there anything you wanted to say specifically that the board should know?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I think the scope of services speaks for itself. I'm here to answer questions on that, and I was also just going to advise you that the first year, we're about finished with your audit. So I just had a conversation this morning with the audit partner that's overseeing the trust financial audit this year, Ron Whiteside from Purvis Gray Company, and so we should have a full report to you very soon. But all good news there. The audit's gone very well. We won't be any management comments or anything like that. The trust is going to get clean. As it relates to your agenda item here, I don't really have anything to add to the scope of services, and if it's approved, I look forward to working with the executive director to help you find an accounting firm.
Okay. Thanks, Tom. Thanks for everything. Thanks for giving us a lot of leeway. Yes.
Move approval of releasing RFP 2021-4, accomplished services.
Second.
Motion second. Do we have any discussion? And all over, just saying that I am supposed to give at least a minute for public input. So anybody from the public has anything for this motion? Somebody sing the Jeopardy song.
We're all hearing it in our heads now.
Okay, I'm lot of people who are going to comment on that. So, all those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion is unanimous. Okay. All right, next item would be Kristen. Kristen, do the next three items, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Go Wire, it's all yours. And thank you very much.
You're welcome. So the first item on the agenda, for me is the On the Way Advisory Committee update. We held our committee meeting on, February 26th with, Dr. Hart and Dr. Snyder. During that committee meeting, we provided an overview of our, funded initiative on the way, and, also provided an overview of our objectives and our strategies. During that time, Dr. Hart and Dr. Snyder were able to provide feedback and some guidance on those different strategies. What we are doing now, you guys got an opportunity to meet our Pulitzer Fellow last month, I believe it was, at the meeting. So she and I have been meeting to discuss those comments from Dr. Hart and Dr. Snyder, as well as the comments that we received from the public that participated. We are taking, we're digging deeper into those strategies, meeting with our grant partners, and with Colin's assistance, we're going to be able to finalize what those strategies look like. All of that will be presented to the board, as well as presented to the other providers, prenatal providers in Alachua County. I do want to give Dr. Hart and Dr. Snyder an opportunity to comment on this item if they have any follow-up.
Who wants to go first? Dr. Hart?
First of all, I just want to thank the public for participating, anybody who was on that call and is on this call. We really appreciate your input, and some people were encouraging us that we were on the right track. Other people had important feedback for us. And I would have to say the thing I found lacking was the participation of the grassroots people who are going to be using these services. So the parents of the 0 to 5-year-olds. And Christy, I hope that you and Mia will try to wrap your brain around how do we get them involved and make it easy for them to participate with us. Do we need to do a focus group? I don't know. I'm open to suggestions, but I really want to hear their voices.
Thank you, Dr. Hart. And Pat, would you like to add to this?
Sure. So I agree with what Nancy said, and I think it's really important. I think the other thing that we heard and learned is that the 3 existing programs that we have in place are an important part of the Pritzker initiative in terms of the strategies and whatnot that have been identified as part of that initiative. And so there was comment and discussion about continuation, but also expansion and refinement based on some lessons that we've learned. It was mentioned about the need to involve existing programs in many of the discussions around On the Way, including their involvement in several of the meetings that are happening under Mia's leadership, and again, to help inform recommendations moving forward. And then I believe, and maybe this is what you were alluding to, that Colin was going to check into some rules related to quote unquote, and I'm probably using the wrong word, but committee membership and input and advise to the group, our group, meaning the trust group, about next steps. So how we can, or if we can, involve others in these conversations as members of the quote unquote On the Way committee.
Thank you, Pat.
So So as we are moving forward, we will be, working to address all of those, comments as well as those that came from the meeting, and, we look forward to keeping everyone posted on where we are.
Any questions on this item? Chrissy, I have one. You know, the information, it says from kindergarten to eight years old. With that in mind, the 0 to kindergarten territory, can y'all hear me okay on the, out there in TV land? So the 3 programs that are currently being offered from, you know, prenatal to 3 to 5, where does the expansion come with that, if there is an expansion? Because this doesn't include that, and the summer programs don't include that. So, I don't think that we totally come up with everything that needs to happen from 0 to 5. So, is that just gonna be part of this discussion, on the way?
Yes, so the prenatal to 5, that will be all included in the On the Way initiative.
Okay.
Is that what you're asking?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, absolutely. So, you know, our Pritzker agreement is prenatal to 3, but the trust has included all the way, children up to age 5 in that agreement, yes.
Okay, all right, so at some point in time, we'll get recommendations for what else, how we
Yes.
can do more needs to be done,
Yes.
which I'm sure it does. So, thank you very much. The next item.
The next item in your packet is the Pritzker, Children's Initiative Award Letter. This is just confirmation, from the Pritzker Foundation that we will receive our second payment. As you guys can recall, I included an, interim report to the Pritzker Foundation, and that is what generated this payment. So this is just confirmation of that.
Any questions? Thank you, and again, good job for getting the grant first place.
The next item is the summer programming RFP. And so we have a PowerPoint that we're going to pull up for everyone. And, I'm gonna review what's found in the RFP and, take any questions that you all may have, at the end of the presentation. I'm gonna start with, the overview of the solicitation. The purpose and our goal of the RFP is that we would like to increase the summer slots for low-income families by increasing summer programming capacity in Alachua County. The total award is up to $500,000 to offer full and partial scholarships to children entering kindergarten through 8th grade. Those eligible applicants, can be governmental entities, for-profit, not-for-profit, and faith-based, organizations. We intend to release this, proposal tomorrow, March 9th, you know, contingent upon board approval today. We'll be offering a bidders conference and application training for all the providers. That is scheduled for March 11th. That bidders conference will include an, overview of the RFP, an application, demo, and an opportunity for all providers to ask, questions and receive answers to those questions, you know, for as many questions as we can get through, of course. Providers will also be able to submit questions to the trust regarding the RFP through an email that we have identified on the cover letter of the RFP. They'll be able to submit questions through March 26th, and all those questions will be posted on our website every Friday. The deadline for the application is, March 30th, and there will be a review period March 31st through April 4th. All funding recommendations will be presented to the board at the April meeting, and it's our goal to start contract negotiations within a couple weeks after board approval. The minimum qualifications for, applicants, they all need to be, qualified to conduct business within the state of Florida. They all should have out-of-school time experience. Their proposed summer camp programming must be in person, and, the public schools and charter schools do not qualify for trust funding. However, collaboration with public schools and charter schools is encouraged. And the term of services, we intend to have fully executed contracts in place by May 1st through August 31st. Our target population for this RFP is children from low-income families living in Alachua County who are rising kindergartners through 8th grade. Contractors will recruit and enroll children into summer programming. The trust is also creating a marketing plan that will help our Alachua County families identify who the providers are who will have the scholarship funds. Full scholarships are for children from families at or below 200% of the 2020 federal poverty threshold, children with individualized educational plans, IEPs, and or children from families receiving SNAP benefits. Partial scholarships are for children from families between 200% and 400% of the 2020 federal poverty level. Any children receiving school readiness funds at a site will not be eligible for summer programming funds at that same site. If their parent enrolls them into a different site, then they are eligible for the summer funding. Funding will be prioritized by percentage of children living in poverty in each zip code. And there should be a zip code table in your packet. Okay, great. For scheduling, frequency, and duration, we are allowing our programs to have, wide latitude concerning, scheduling, frequency, and the duration of their program. Research shows that long-term programs do have better outcomes. For that reason, we're not funding drop-in programs. We intend for our providers to require some type of, attendance policy that encourages families to have longer-term attendance. I do realize we're having some technical difficulties. You guys want me to pause or continue? I think you do have the PowerPoint in your packet.
We do.
All right, perfect. All services must be provided in Alachua County. Applicants providers that apply for these funding must complete site profiles. Providers will be allowed to apply for more than one site. And within the RFP, we did include a link to the summer needs assessment. Our first step in implementing, what we're calling a thriving summer ecosystem is to offer activities under the transformative learning section of the conceptual framework that you can find in the RFP. These activities focus on academic, enrichment, exploratory, and physical health, play, and recreation. Providers will need to describe how they will implement at least one of those activities under this RFP, but they are not required to offer more than one. Applicants will need to demonstrate solid staff experience with similar services, including certifications and or years of service. When possible, programs are encouraged to consider hiring staff from local schools that primarily serve their area. Providers must also identify at least one program director to administer the program, and the ratio shall not be greater than one staff for every 20 youth. Level 2 background screenings as well as fingerprinting will be required for all staff. And each summer program will always have at least one site member or member on site with a current and valid certification in first aid and infant and child CPR. For data collection, even though this is our first RFP for summer, providers will be required to collect participant demographics, parental consent and images, releases for images, participant attendance, and satisfaction surveys. Providers will be expected to attend a summer programming training at the beginning of the contract year to go over all data collection requirements and tools. Additionally, data is expected to be entered on a weekly basis throughout the summer. By the end of the summer, we will be able to present to this board, where our families reside, what areas of the county what children we're serving, and where those providers are located. We will evaluate each applicant based on whether the applicant clearly meets all minimum qualifications to bid, and did the applicant complete certification responses satisfactorily. Applicants clearly outlined experience and ability to provide safe and enriching summer services. We'll be evaluating whether the applicant completed site profiles, described site activities, and if staffing described is aligned with the RFP. We'll also evaluate whether the applicant completed the site budget sections and does all costs appear reasonable. 1 point is given for each area of the total, for a total of 4 points, and applicants that meet the criteria will be recommended for funding. For this RFP, proposals will be reviewed by Colin and I. Again, the review period is March 30 through April 4th. Funding recommendations, again, will be presented to the board by April 5th for discussion and approval at the April 12th board meeting. If needed, there is a process for applicants to protest board award decisions, and we're hoping to start negotiations for contracts by mid-April. For future RFPs, the trust is interested in creating an application process for experts in our community to assist us with reviewing proposals. So the RFP application, a completed application for this is 3 forms. It's just 3 forms. We listened to the feedback that we received from the providers in our area, and we tried to make sure that this was a fair process and a process where everyone felt that they would have a fair opportunity to complete and get a good application in. So the 3 forms is the prospective contractor certification form, the organizational information and narrative form, and then the site profile. As I stated earlier, during our bidders conference, we will go through this entire application process with the providers. They'll be able to ask questions. They'll see an example. We'll create an agency and go through that entire process with them.
Christy, I might recommend that you might want a little larger font on this.
Well, it wasn't for you to read off of the slide, but I'm hoping within the packet you saw the version that our providers will. But I'll work on that next time. You'll also notice in the RFP that there are clear deliverables for the providers to follow. There's, payment based on when they submit their deliverables. Again, all of this we will train our providers on. We're excited about being able to collect actual data, and get that information into them to share with the board as well as the public. There was one other thing I wanted to mention. When we're looking at our performance measures, we'll be looking again at quantity, which is how much, quality, and effort, how well our service is provided, and then client benefits. Is anyone better off? So we'll have parent and child satisfaction surveys. We will conduct monitoring at the providers and closely monitor the number of children that are enrolled with the weekly submission of data. What we are recommending from the board is to approve the release of the summer RFP, authorize $500,000 for summer programming, and authorize the executive director to appoint the review team for the RFP.
Okay, so do we have a motion and get all the questions?
So moved. Second.
Have a motion and a second, and now the questions. Anybody have any questions?
I do. So a couple of questions. The timeline, if we're really looking to expand capacity, obviously a little bit, just because you have to hire to expand capacity and still meet that ratio, boy, that's tight, especially getting them through level 2 screenings and all of that process. So, and clearly if there's a protest, that all goes out the window and could really impact the effectiveness. But I mean, I just think that's something to be aware of. I don't know that there's anything we can do about it, but it struck me as a really tight implementation and contracting timeline. The other question I had is, because that was really more of a comment and observation, for those, the contract is cost reimbursement, right? Or are you paying up front? She said based on deliverables, meeting deliverables, so.
So the first payment, there's a 25% advance
Okay.
in the RFP.
So that should get people able to
Yes.
get up and running and
That will allow them to
overcome any cash flow.
Yes, absolutely.
And then, other than satisfaction measures and site visits, are you gonna have a tool for looking at how well they're implementing whatever that transformative strategy was going to be? In a summer program, you're not gonna have dramatic impact on reading level or just, those kinds of things, but some form of, other than parental satisfaction, of knowing how you implemented something that's designed to be transformative.
I would not expect great transformation from this RFP.
I wouldn't, right.
This is year one, and this is baseline. So the recommendation was year one, to just expand what's already out there. So as you can see on the site profile, that we've grouped the activities in 4 categories. We left off the other 4 we're actually 8 categories in the original recommendation. We left off the last 4 because we didn't think anyone would understand what they mean yet. So next summer really starts in September after this one, and I would expect next year to look a lot different than this year. I would say the one thing you probably can't impact in the summer is reading, but it takes a program that preventing loss is what I mean in the summer. But it takes a prescribed program implemented with fidelity, which is not what these are. This is people doing kind of what they think is working, and then us setting some baselines. I think the real win, if we were successful, would be that we know who showed up to our programs, how often, and that we had the data to then maybe match with some other data to give us a baseline of how our kids do this summer, so that next year we can collect more things. Now, as far as implementing, if they tell us they're going to do tutoring, that will be part of their monitoring. We'll take their site profile and say, here's what you said you were going to do and how often. Is that what you're doing? But I would lower the expectations for great transformations this year and kind of use it as a baseline.
It was just in there, so I thought, okay, how are you gonna do that? Yeah. And then my last is 1 to 20 is great for regular kids, but if you've got kids with any kinds of special needs, 1 to 20 is a really iffy ratio.
1 to 20 is the absolute, I
Yeah,
mean, we would expect it based on their program.
so okay, so you are gonna,
But if it's 1 to 30, that's not gonna get funded.
right, but if you have a group of highly special needs kids, 1 to 10, 1 to 5, depending on,
Yep.
that's, yeah. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Dr. Hunter?
So I have a couple. So when I look at the evaluation criteria, I mean, it looks like you have 4 options. It's either you get it or you don't get it. And one is like meeting the minimum requirements.
That's it.
Well, so it seems, I think the work that was done with the transformative learning, the academic, enrichment, exploratory, and physical, those seem to be guiding principles that the RFP is trying to address, but there's no expectation of addressing the DL. Is that correct?
No, I mean, they have to explain it in the site profile, so if they do, they get a point, if not, they get 0.
Okay, I guess if we're looking at this as baseline and, you know, preparing for future steps, it might be helpful to at least have the evaluation criteria, you know, are you hitting one of these requirements or are you not? I mean, it doesn't,
Okay.
I guess I'm not seeing like a direct connection. And then that'll go into my next question. Are you looking at, for this, 500,000, to have a wide range? Like, are we anticipating that you'd like to have at least funding for each one of these? Or what if you end up just having like total academic? Are we comfortable with only academic summer programs, or do we want to have enrichment and exploratory? Like, how are we kind of guiding that distribution?
I have no idea what we're gonna get, and that's, I don't think there's ever been $500,000 dropped on the county at one time in the summer. So, this was meant to be very, I could be wrong, but, this was meant to almost be an opt-in process. In other words, if you can meet certain minimum requirements, we're willing to give you a shot, and then we'll evaluate through site visits and the data, if you can meet the way we expect to do business. But this is not expected even to be renewable. So next year, or earlier on, so we have more time, we expect to come back with another summer RFP based on what we've learned this year. So I understand that the bar is very low. That's actually what the recommendations were, and I think we agreed on such a short time. Now, as far as the types of activities and how we're gonna do that, I can't answer that because I don't know what we'll get. The intent was, is to allow programs as diverse as full summer, all-day programs to apply, but also if you're a 1-week, photo camp or museum camp or 2-week something else, which is a handful. So we expect a broad diversity, this summer, and really that was the intent. But you have to hit all, the site profile has all 4 activities, so if you can't fit at least one of them, you're not gonna get funded. So for example, someone is a drop-in program that, they can't collect attendance, they don't keep track of who showed up, they don't have any defined program, that's not gonna qualify. So there are ones out there that aren't gonna make it. But in the site profile, you have to put your program in one of those 4 activities, and you might have multiple. You might be academic and physical, or enrichment and, physical, or enrichment and academic or something.
So maybe just a letter F in that box that says must meet at least one of the specified.
We can, yeah, certainly.
Yes, and then if they don't meet at least one, that box automatically becomes a no, but it's in there, it's real clearly that that's part of the
Does
evaluation.
that help?
Yeah, I think,
Okay, we can do that.
and this was a religious organization, could they qualify for this?
Religious can apply, they just can't proselytize as part of the program. So the program can't be religious. So I've had plenty of churches in the past deliver summer programming, but it's not Bible school or something. it's a, you know, it's one of the 4 categories: academic, enrichment, exploratory.
And then lastly, what about ninth graders to 12th graders?
Yeah, that's a completely different scope of service. These are meant to be camps where kids go to. I understand the concern for, that age group. I think I talked with Member Certain, and she's gonna offer a motion, at some point, to kind of get me out of this here. But that is a completely different set of, activities that we're actually gonna hear about later in the board meeting. And so hopefully, after we get done with the Community Foundation's presentation, we'll be able to take some action in future board meetings.
The winner of the whole contest Saturday night. Oh, that's right, yeah.
I was afraid of the problem. Yes. So Colin and Christy, first of all, a great job of getting this all together. I'm really happy that we're at a place where we can get this off the ground, and I understand the limitations of a first year. Couple of questions following up on Dr. Simon. On page 143, the scoring will work when you're looking at the transformational learning and transformational development. You're looking at site profile, is that where they get that 1 or 0, not on the organizational capacity?
Yes, so organizational eligibility, capacity, site profiles, and site budget is where they get their points, where we're evaluating them, their score to determine.
Summer learning concepts, conceptual framework, you're focusing on the site profile number?
Yeah. So the first 2 categories, organizational eligibility, capacity, are in Form 2.
Yep.
Site profile is Form 3, and we're only focusing on the far, when you look at the, conceptual framework, it's only the first 4 on the far left. Academic and this year.
So, yeah, so I do think that, because we're baselining and we're gathering information, to the extent we can identify which of the 4, most all of them will reach the last one, because we're all playing recreation, I would presume. And I think to Dr. Simon's point, just capturing what those programs are would be great, so that would be my first one. Second point, page 141, when we talk about the targeting of zip codes, that's actually one of the most exciting points that I see in this, and I would love if we were focused on 32641 and 603 and 640 and 601. How are we focusing on that? Are we asking the providers to just identify that zip code and gathering that data, or are you giving more weight to the higher areas of poverty in these zip codes?
So more weight is given to them, especially if there is a limited amount of funding, or the requests exceed the amount of money that we have allocated for this. And then there is priority given to those zip codes due to the poverty percentage.
So all things being equal, if you had a 32641 versus a 32608, the same program, we're trying to fund the 32641 because of the poverty. So,
Yes.
okay, that's a great answer. Page 174, and maybe we'll get to the, in the top box, registration for philanthropy. What role is the foundation playing in this evaluation? Or are they just checking the box?
None in the evaluation.
Okay.
So we're taking we're gonna fund for government. You could be a private child care center, you could be a government, private,
Government,
Not-
for-profit, not-for-profit, faith-based.
faith-based. So, private business doesn't have to register in Philanthropy Hub, so we don't want to exclude, we wanted to kind of level and getting in the door. But once you're in, if you're a nonprofit, you'll have to register with the Philanthropy Hub.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
As your first deliverable.
Yeah, and that will give them evidence that they are, that's one of the boxes they can check right there.
Yep.
Okay, that's great. 500,000, are there any limits on the programs or the entities?
No. We didn't say
Can one program that's great all around the county get all the money, or is it gonna
No, well, part of the policies on how we do it is we take the scores, and then the executive director takes it and makes a recommendation. And it's right in our policies that the funding, the score is only 1, 2, 3, 4, but the highest score doesn't necessarily guarantee you all the funding. And so that's why we put in the zip codes in there to guide us.
What's the goal for the number of kids to serve with the $500,000?
Well, originally my goal was about 500 kids. I thought it would cost about $1,000 a kid. That's not, well, I see the head shaking. It could be more, it could be less. And so I don't think anything would prevent us from saying, hey, we got 750,000 of great proposals. What do you think? 5,000 was just kind of based on funding, 500 kids, 500 at the time was the best information we had, so.
Okay, great, thank you very much.
Judge Wilson?
Question, as far as the percentage under 18 living in poverty, are those numbers, do they take into account COVID and families affected by
There's no such
COVID
data.
over the past?
That's no data. That data probably isn't out.
But is that something that can be considered in terms of the allocation?
Yes, it can be considered.
Steve?
I had one other question on the zip code targeting, Christie. I'm not completely clear. Would it be that the provider is potentially serving children that live in those zip codes, or located?
So the provider can either be located in that area, or the provider can show some evidence, especially if it's an experienced provider, and they have been working with children, and there are children that are from those zip codes that come to their area. If they have that experience, take that into consideration as well.
So, I'm still confused about the weighting. Where's the weighting and the evaluation criteria?
The waiting for,
How they're weighted based on the zip code students that they're serving? Like, if that's an incentive to, if that program is hitting the student population we're interested in focusing on, how does the evaluation criteria measure that?
evaluation criteria, we're gonna get people in green that are funded, there's green, yellow, and red.
Okay.
We're gonna go through the green, and we'll say, where are they serving kids from, and we'll stick them on a map and say, okay, and then we'll keep moving down. And so if we're out of money, and then it may mean that someone in a lower zip code does, we move and prioritize based on that. And that is the policy in our, is that we have that flexibility to be able to do that. That's the only way I know of, to do that.
If you're going to say that you may only partially fund if you have too many, then you probably also need somewhere on the application to ask, can you do this for less, or what would be the implication of only being partially funded? So if somebody does come in and say, I want 100,000, and you're only gonna give them 50, they need to know that ahead of time. They may be able to then give you a budget that's in blocks of money. We can add 10 kids for this much, 20 kids for this much.
Yeah,
Or,
in the caps column, what we've done historically is just a sentence that says, if your program is partially funded, how would that impact your efforts?
And we actually did it on this.
yeah, we did it.
Contract negotiation.
Yeah.
Can I say something? I like that idea, if we were like really pinching pennies, but we're not like when my kids are 25 and 27. And when they were in school, I used to budget $120 for summer, each. So they're 25 and 27 now, and so that was, 15 years ago? So I wouldn't expect anybody under $200 a week now for a decent program, full-time. I don't have any kids. So, that being said.
That's a lot, then.
That's a lot. And so really and that would be like maybe 500 kids. But if we got a proposal back and it was more kids, we have more than $500,000. Please bring a list back to the board and say, I think everybody here would agree to funding whatever we got. If we got good proposals to come back and to fund something else. That's how I feel, I'm sorry.
That's what we'll do.
Okay, yeah, I would agree with that.
Anybody else want to?
That's all, she's up to close.
I was very happy to see that everybody is concerned about the measurables. That's important because I had a conversation with Colin this morning about the fact that essentially the measurables on this application is how many kids showed up and did they show up? And my concern was we've made a fairly, big deal about the fact that, the reading drop off from May to August. And, we want to do something. And Colin did, and he's already given it once, a very good explanation about this is a baseline. And we're not really sure what we're getting this year. But he assured me that in next year's application, we're going to ratchet it up. Because we want to see some performance measures and, realistic ones other than just the children showed up and, they attended, which there obviously is going to be a benefit to that, but that's not what I don't believe any of us sitting here, want to be our standard. That we would want that standard to be have much higher expectations. So I was okay with that explanation. I think that what we're going to do as far as adding the question about does it satisfy, one of our initiatives, I think that's a good suggestion. The next year.
Can I add on to that?
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a lot of benefit to, at the end of the summer, surveying the parents of the participants and just getting some baseline information on how they felt their kids did throughout the summer. But I'm sure there'll be better suggestions than that.
I also think it's an opportunity in a consultative way with some of these agencies to start talking to them about, well, you said this was going to be a transformative approach or an enrichment approach. What is it that was enriching, and did you really implement it the way you thought? And that's what I was asking. The site visits, I think, are an opportunity to talk about that and to really help them so that next year when we're actually talking about some outcomes around behavioral change or reading change or whatever, they already have some sense of what a process of evaluation of that looks like, so that it's evaluated and the outcomes are going to be measured, and these are the things that we'll be looking at. Because these folks are going to come back next year, we know that, right? You're going to...
Brings up a really good point, and we want to say this as many times during this meeting as possible. It's non-renewable. This is a one-year program.
The one summer program.
Whatever happens this year, that's going to be it. Next year is a totally different program. And that just because you did something this year does not mean you're going to get something next year. And if all y'all want to repeat it individually, that's fine. So maybe it'll get across because it's certainly, there were some issues this year. So
Just in terms of measurable outcomes, I'd be interested to see the juvenile crime rate, the summer previous to the award of the funding for these particular programs, something that can be measured certainly within that age group.
Yeah, I will make this point. When we were looking at some of the other trusts around the state and talking to their executive directors, one thing that became really clear for some of the ones that have been doing this for over a decade is that they kind of started out like we're starting out, but after a couple of years, like certain entities kind of rose to the top. And what ended up happening is they would say, yeah, well, this entity does our summer thing. And so I would expect, while this is a one-year thing, that we're looking for best practices and entities that can deliver on those deliverables in an effective way for the entire community. So while it is a one-year thing, I would suspect that we'll maybe expand this program, but we may have actually less entities because we're looking for the cream, the right
this
stuff.
is a one-year audition.
It's the beginning, yeah.
And I think part of what Judge Vogt said and what Ken, I think us being able to measure that, but I think also in our community, because we haven't had funding and because of the low-income nature of things, you may not have had a lot of providers providing services to communities that could not afford to pay.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's why this list of providers, what I was asking for from the research team, is really so critical so we can see where they're located, because in some communities, because there's not the resources there from the family to pay for that, we may have had a fewer number, but the importance of disseminating information from the trust that there is this funding there, and people may step forward to be able to provide services and programming to our, to areas where there are a large number of children that live in poverty. I mean, just, unfortunately, they don't have the money to pay for it, but it's not there, the services aren't there, but with us having a funding source that's, a voter-approved tax initiative, we can get someone who will come in and be a provider in those areas.
Or collaborate with others.
Collaborate, yeah,
And I apologize, Dr. Hart, Pat, Cheryl, Karen, if y'all have anything to say, just wave your hand and I promise, okay? Dr. Hart?
Can I just repeat what I thought I heard to make sure I understood? It sounded to me like what we are trying to do is for one summer, increase the capacity of programs in favor of these zip codes where we know there are more children in poverty. Does that sound right?
Pretty much, yes.
And I also heard that this is really meant for children between kindergarten and 8th grade.
Correct.
So we do or don't have a plan for the 9 to 12 grade children, as Judge Bullard referred to in terms of juvenile contact?
Let me just be clear, the contacts include, certainly not kindergarten, but anywhere between, 11 and that 9th grade. But if you want to address the summer program with the older kids, that's something that we addressed in the meeting a couple of weeks ago. And there's certainly a need, no question. No question.
Okay, so I have more. Can I just keep going? Thank you, Judge Bullard, for clarification. I always forget that younger children get involved with juvenile justice, and that is a very important thing to remind us of from time to time. But I'm wondering, since we're not going to require a lot of stringent criteria from this group of contractees, use this opportunity to get a little information from them that we'll use for the next funding round. For example, I'm interested in plans for transportation, especially for children who live in areas where their parents are unlikely to have access to an automobile. And then I know I'm probably not supposed to refer over to the work of the Youth Development Committee, which was really wonderful, that that event that was that focus grouped by Community Foundation. It's got a lot of really good information in there. And one thing that I'm worried about for these age groups is age appropriate sex ed things like good touch, bad touch for the little kids. And then for the slightly older children, red flags when adults are grooming you for trafficking. I mean, some of those things, some programs may already be alluding to, and it would be a good time to find out who's touching on those subjects and who's doing it well, so that the next time we can give extra points for it, or maybe we can give extra points for it this time. I just think these are really important health things that are not in any of the criteria so far. And then mental health, I think there is mental health first aid for high school age kids. I don't know if they have that for middle school age kids, but there was a lot of, in Barcelo report, there was a whole lot about mental health first aid need for high school age kids.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I had my hand up, but you all did a great job of answering and asking all of the questions I was going to ask. The only thing that I have left on my sort of wondering list is, I wonder if it's possible, particularly after Tina's comment about the escalation of probably what the weekly costs are for summer programming, if there's any way, Colin, and maybe you've already thought about this, that we can get some information about the numbers of families who are asset limited and income constrained but employed.
This is Karen. I do have one recommendation with regards to the sex education. Kendra Alberry is a good contact. If you go online, you can probably find a lot of information about the different programs and services that she provides for some of the younger student populations. The second thing that I thought about, particularly in reference to the East Gainesville community, was the Santa Fe College's College for Kids program that has been in existence for many years, but unfortunately, many of the programs were many of the persons in the community, particularly in East Gainesville, could not afford those programs. So I'm hopeful that, this time around, even though it's for 1 year only, that there would be some possibilities that young people in East Gainesville who historically could not afford those programs can now take advantage of those programs if those programs exist this summer. That's it.
Thank you, Karen. Cheryl, do you have anything? Okay, if no further comments from the board, I'll open it up to
I do have
the.
just one other question.
Judge?
Is there, because transportation certainly is an issue with the younger kids and the older kids, we hear the same thing, we heard the same thing in our committee meeting. Is it possible for, if a program does not provide transportation and even funding them at the maximum, they're still not able to provide that somebody could apply for funding for that specific purpose to provide transportation to or for the other programs?
Can I give a suggestion? My suggestion would be, we can add on a lot, there's a budget in the site profile on page, would you tell me what page it's on? So if you look at the budget section.
55.
Okay, I'm looking on the RFP, not the,
If you look in your packet.
155 is what I see, a budget, site budget summary.
yeah. So we can add a line, if you'd like, we can add a line item for transportation. We bought about 7 vans in the last thing, which I did not support that, but I didn't officially start yet. So there's vans out there, and we can have people put that in specifically as a separate line item in their budget, or they can include it in their per child per day cost. It's fine with me, but we can specifically add it as a separate line item. I'll just tell you from experience, if we pay to transport everybody, we and other systems don't help us, we're gonna run out of money. So that's gonna take an effort, long-term.
Colin, in one of the background information we had, there was the chart, the pie chart we had, transportation was one of the lowest ranked items.
Yes, in the YDRPP it was, because the parents thought in the summer if they could get their kids to a quality program, they do whatever they take to get there. That was the feedback we got from Deegan. Now, we have paid for vans.
That's different than the feedback we got 2 years ago. 2 years ago, transportation was one of the biggest issues.
Absolutely.
That's
That's what we heard, but, background, somewhere, about, you've heard,
It
we've
was
all
like,
heard
what,
that.
35 parents? Yeah, that's,
Situation and all
But
education.
don't say that, because then it shows that,
Well, it's a sample, it's a very limited sample of parents, so 35 parents. And I think the observation, the parents would be willing to do anything possible until week 2 or 3, and then the strain hits, and they're not able to. I'll tell you, I've sat on more committees about youth issues in the last 35 years than I care to remember, and transportation is like always near the very top.
I mean, I hate to keep breaking in on here, but I think what we will find in our base year evaluation is that if we're really focused on these areas of poverty, that those kids have a transportation issue, and that it will probably make a lot of sense for the trust to invest in, I'm not saying a bus service, but a high-need, highly flexible, and highly mobile transportation solution to get a handful of kids that have no transportation, because their family has no transportation, to the activity. And I know it can become a black hole of money, but I know also that 2 years ago, we as a board of 5 considered funding basically a transportation model to provide the existing service providers with, let us get the kids to you and then you take it from there, and it didn't, we talked about that, you know, that maybe the one thing we do is we do transportation.
Or coordination with the school board.
Or coordination, right, coordination with the school board. So I just want to keep it on the table of continuing to discuss, because it's a big, big issue with families.
Well, we can add it, and.
Yeah, no, I think it's worth it.
And
I
even
think
in coordination to pay for bus passes, if we're working with RTS, or, you know, of course, there's safety issues and.
Yeah, for the little
More,
ones, but some of these kids are used to riding the bus if they could,
Sure.
if they could have the money for fare.
Or
Very
perhaps what we could do is ask the city
That's it.
manager if it's not a new route, and just ride for free.
Well, we're doing that. So
Yeah, they're doing that.
The city and county are funding the under 18 and over 65 for free. I mean, that's like on the table.
Okay.
So, doesn't deal with safety issues, but that's on the table with bus routes. But I still think there's gonna be a need outside of that for a handful.
Okay, we have a whole nother thing to do, items, so.
And we have one, and after this, I'll make the motion for this, for us to move past that.
We made it
Had a motion on
we
that.
made it early.
Oh, that's right.
So,
Yeah,
so,
public
but
comment.
we probably do want to add the comment about
The high schoolers.
the additional, y'all can add to the original motion, whatever.
So to the original motion, I'd like to add, the addition of a line to add for transportation costs, if providers want to put that in there. We don't want to buy no vans, so no more vans, we bought enough of them, but, we're just kidding. As well as, I'd like to also bring up something for our high school age students. Then we give, not as part of this RFP because it's not in there, but if we give them, Executive Director Murphy the authority to evaluate high school programs that would serve children ninth grade to 12th grade for the summer period. Because that is a big need. We have some needs for those kids as well. This RFP as put together, Christy and staff, they've done a good job of doing that, so I don't want to blow this out of the water. But I do think we need to make some provision, and if we don't want to do it in this motion, we have a separate motion for it, for Murphy to be able to, solicit, proposals from providers that would service students that are in grades 9 through 12.
Why don't we do that on a separate?
Okay.
But we do want to include the item, about the.
Transportation and,
Do we want to say, why don't we put consideration for transportation?
okay.
So we can get a feel for it, as opposed to saying it's automatic, because that gives you enough flexibility.
My suggestion was we just add it as a line item, and if people need it, they can propose it. And since we already have said we'll bring back all proposals, even if it's a movement, I think that would be fine.
Now we're hearing that we want, and there's nothing wrong with this, the high school, we're talking about, we allocated $500,000, it means sometimes money becomes an object. And so if we're also thinking about doing something for high school, we need,
This is separate, we're gonna do that as a separate motion, which is gonna take separate money, I suspect.
But the point, what I'm trying to say is, we need to think about the money issue. That they're, you're doing one thing, we're putting out there that come back for more money, but then again, we're thinking about a whole nother, program potentially for high schoolers, so we need to think about the money issue, and as we go through this process.
My feeling on the older kids is I want to hear from the next presentation first, and what we want to do on that. But I think adding transportation and also adding the categories of what they're needing that we're evaluating through the profile, those four categories, Tom.
Are they meeting one of the objectives?
Yeah, what the objectives are that the program is meeting.
Yeah, you're talking about the poor academic enrichment. Okay, that is on there, but we'll make sure it's crystal clear.
On the evaluation form, just that one line, add that one
Yep,
bullet.
yep, we'll make sure, oh, yes, we'll.
I was just the maker of the motion.
Okay, in 2 seconds. Okay,
I'm good.
We're good, yes.
so they're good with the additions to the motion. So, want to open up to the public for any comments, at this point? So, Ashley,
Out of the comments.
You want to wait for 1 minute?
beg pardon? Yeah, what, no, if there's somebody up there, we can go ahead.
Oh, no, there is no public comment.
Really?
But yes, I will wait.
So now we need a big clock.
Mr. Chair, could you ask if there's any in the chat?
Is there any in the chat? Any comments in the chat? Have to help you with technology.
To the computers now?
Yeah.
We have comments. Gentleman Temple would like the in-person attendees to identify themselves when they speak. Rachel Stroh says that she understands RFP won't be awarded for families who already have ELC school readiness funding. Would it be possible to award partial scholarships for families who have ELC school readiness? Most families still have to pay out of pocket for the difference of what ELC pays and what the provider charges.
Is that it? Okay.
Jasmine said she would love to hear the connotation focus only on a positive spin. For example, please share examples of the positive outcomes from your awesome summer program where funding was provided, instead of, so you said your summer program was going to do X, Y, Z, so where's the evidence? These programs are being put in place with only the best intentions, I choose to believe. With that in mind, we should approach the programs with positive expectations. Great thought, Dr. Hart. I like the idea of encompassing sex ed and safety ed. Sherry Kitchens says, yes, Kendra is amazing. Dorothy Benson says she agrees with Dr. Paul-Smith's recommendations of Kendra Albury and her Peer to Taste initiative. She has books and does presentations. A portion of her program could easily be incorporated into any organization's summer programs.
Any calls? Okay, all right. Good recommendations. Did y'all get any of that? Or y'all just peruse through it after it's done?
We do both.
Okay, all right. Okay, so all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion is unanimous. And now, okay, now it's time for the roundtable, I believe. Judge Willard, or member certain, before we turn the meeting over to Ms. Papa of the Community Foundation, would you like to say a few words before we get into the presentation?
Well, I would just hats off to Marcella and Leslie and your team. I think your daughter was on too, Sophie. I mean, you all did such a fabulous job, and for Christy and Colin, everybody who worked on that. I mean, you kept us focused, you kept us engaged and motivated, and you were able to deal with all the technology and really get some good solid information and recommendations. And you also were able to gather some information about existing programming in the area. So you kind of hit all the points, and again, hats off to you all, outstanding job. And to all of the people who participated from the community as well, who provided feedback and very helpful comments. People really worked very hard.
So how can we make this possible for you? How would you like to present it?
We used to have a podium. Did we, why don't you say where Todd is sitting?
Todd's looking for a reason.
Todd is looking for an exit, okay.
Sorry, you're so heartbroken, I have to leave it.
There you go.
Wait a minute, shuffle your feet, gosh. Thanks, Todd.
The camera too for you.
Yes, and thank you for coming today. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having us. It was our pleasure to do this work. It was an amazing group of local experts that convened on a crack day on a Friday morning, and we did this all virtually, so it was, I think we got some great outcomes. So thank you so much for working on that. So what we're going to do is we're going to recap kind of what we did that day, and we're going to talk about some of the things that we found. We did this. On a side note, we'll talk about it towards the end, but I'll bring it up now. We did something similar to Key Foundation more than a decade ago, where we did a mapping gap, but it was community-wide. So we had over 40 providers there. That time, I'm trying to remember what year it was, it was 12 years ago. So it's very interesting. Look at this, and take a look at back a decade, and I'll talk about it towards the end. So we were tasked with the age 6 to 18. So why is that important? Well, 18% of the population here is under the age of 18, of which 70% fall right in that category of 6 to 18. So we shared the mission of we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. We reiterated the mission of the trust and the vision to the group. And as I said, it was a wide variety of experts that joined us that day, so we got a lot of great team. Go ahead. So basically what we wanted to do that day, the mission was to look at where we are, current issues, who the current providers, and I reeled together all that information and turned it into this packet. Where we want to be, and most importantly, what do we need to do to get there? So talk about the issues, strategizing solutions, and more importantly, look at the outcomes that we're seeking. So we divided the work into, as I said, two groups. We started with the older children, middle and high school, so ages 12 to 18. And then the last half of the session, we focused on the elementary age group, that 6 to 11. And what we did was we facilitated exercises in schools, again, virtually, which was fun. We brainstormed current issues. Again, we had experts at the table, so we wanted to hear from them what they are seeing and hearing in the field. And we had some discussion around it, and it was, for the sake of the time constraints, we prioritized based on the priority areas of the trust. And then we strategized outcomes and solutions. So we did this in 2 segments just to keep it organized. And then we also wanted to catalog the resources and providers of who's working in those priority areas. Okay. So again, I know you all know this very well, the main 4 priority areas is the health of our children, education, the educational readiness, caregiver family support, and safety. So those were the 4 buckets that we worked in that day. So as I said, we started with middle and high school children. That, a lot of attention has been focused on that with COVID and remote learning and whatnot. So we utilized this fun little tool called Jamboard that we started with the health category in middle and high school. And we gave the experts at least 5, 7, or 8 minutes to this is our virtual post-it board. And we asked them to, in their areas of expertise, what were the issues around health, both physically and mentally, of middle schoolers and high schoolers. And we got such great responses. We'll go ahead and go to the next. And I know we have included all of the details in your packet, because there was a lot. And then we asked, after some discussion, for them to prioritize what they thought was the most pressing current issue. And this is the response to middle and high school health prioritized. It was an overwhelming across all priority areas, the mental health of middle and high schoolers right now. So as you see, 17% of the respondents access mental health services, followed behind substance abuse, depression, and then health issues related to poverty. One thing I want to point out, this is just whenever they tallied their vote. However, we saw it multiple times across the Jamboard and posted. Mental health was overwhelming across all 4 priority areas. Next. So this is just a quick summary of the other 3 priority areas. You'll see the middle and high schools, educational equity, the lack of parental support, truancy, lack of engagement, and the tie there for workforce support and placement around education of middle and high schoolers. Safety, it was unbelievable the feedback that we got around gun violence.
middle and high schoolers who are local. Gun violence, peer pressure, social media, we've heard, issues with that. Lack of supervised programs, safe places, and lack of family support, was pressing issues for middle and high school age around safety. And then finally, in family caregiver support, financial concerns. Obviously, I think with the pandemic, there's a lot of concern around the financial situations of many of our community families, followed by a lack of a parent in the home, and then lack of resources. We're going to talk a little more about that when we go into some of the outcomes. Okay? So we spent so much time on the middle and high schoolers that we really had to condense down when we got to elementary. So what we did was we pulled together and we made from 4 priority areas to 2. So we did health and safety, and then education and family caregiver support. So again, these were prioritized. Health and safety, 26% of the respondents wanted to see better out of school time for the elementary age. Social and emotional skills, tied with trauma support, and gaps due to the shutdown around health and safety. Education and family caregiver support, the biggest pressing issue was lack of family support. And what we were hearing there was really a need for parents to have resources for tutoring. Sometimes parents are not equipped to help their children with their homework, so more resources that way of family support around education, meeting their basic needs, lack of family resources, and then educational engagement. So after we had some brainstorming and trying to narrow it down, we asked all of the participants to answer 2 simple questions. Finish these 2 sentences. You'll see we have all the individual responses, and again, great feedback. But the first sentence was, in 8 years, we will know we have succeeded because, and then we asked, in order to succeed, we need to what? Go ahead. We asked for everyone that participated that day to have a lot of resources within each of the 4 priority areas. I believe we have more than 100 in the catalog that we provide to you in your package today. So now we're going to Leslie talk about what we did after we took everything back and tallied it up and compiled the information.
So because of all the exercises that we did, we started with what were the critical issues and trends that we saw, what were the desired outcomes, the suggested solutions that came out of asking those 2 individual questions, and then, of course, the catalog of resources through the units. And again, we were able to then map them out. So next slide. All of the gaps are mapped out in your packet on the report page 2 and page 3 and 4 of the chart. We're going to take some highlights here of the gaps. There's the coordination of resources and services across all priorities that came up on each one of the priorities for coordination. The accessibility of health services, including mental health services. Lack of communication, we noticed this internally and externally. So internally, we're getting out what services are we providing, and externally, where to find those services. Lack of accessible neighborhood resources. The term neighborhood resources came up often in regards to just assigned services. You can look at that comes up quite often. The disproportional resources for parents who are receiving resources and those who aren't, which again also comes down to the communication. Transportation came up often, about where and how to get to services. Teen work programs were a big trend this year for the high school and middle school ages, and then career exploration. And then the new thing that came out that was interesting was all around social media. What they mean by social media is who's monitoring instances of cyberbullying, and a lot of that falls in the category as well. Next slide. So we asked, how do we know we're successful in the 8-year time frame? And obviously, you can hear your report, but increase the acceptance of mental health services and lack of stigma around it, decrease in suicide rates, substance abuse, decrease in reports, decrease in juvenile truancy, especially around gun violence reports as well, increase in parent participation, increase in rate of employee teams who want to be employed. That was specifically for that older high school age group for the after-school program was more important to be employed or opportunities they have for career readiness, increase in after-school programs,
and then the increased rates of dropout and increased school performance. Next slide. Same thing for what is the outcome, how we know we're successful with elementary age kids that are out of school time, what does that mean? Minimal wait list, accessibility, and programs are able to meet the guidelines, for providing that are out of school time. Lower rate of children being retained. We heard this third one a lot, I'm going backwards, that fourth one, they're academically, social, and emotionally ready for middle school and prepared to go into middle school. And then, of course, increased rate of parent participation and that access for all parents to be able to participate. Next slide. So how do we get there? What does it happen? I think some of the little words, but really, again, we heard a lot about coordinated collaboration. And then moving to wraparound services, including family support, seamless pathways for academic and vocational exploration. Again, resources for parents, including tutoring services, mentoring services, services that some parents either don't know how or need help with. Improving communications both internally and externally in the program. And then ending with sort of the final thing, that neighborhood-centered programs and resources provided in their neighborhood. So, key findings. I know there's more in the report that we submitted, but again, when we went back and started tabulating the response, it was overwhelming that mental health absolutely was the top of the pressing issue, the desired outcome, definitely for our middle and high schoolers, and also for elementary as well. So overwhelming consensus around mental health services, the juvenile justice piece as well, truancy, education, equity, and accessibility as well, and solutions. So the parent resources, making sure that parents have the wraparound services that they need as well. Again, mental health was definitely across all the priority areas. Some of the key things that I thought was interesting, the mental health piece really, what we were hearing was really meeting full spectrum. Because, there was talk about the need for self-image programs. Social media was the other buzzword. That's a whole nother layer of complexity. I have a teenager, senior in high school. He's blowing up on social media, so I can speak personally for how complicated that can be to navigate and what teens are facing there. So from social media self-image to depression, all the way to teen suicide and wanting to make sure that we're decreasing and we're addressing that. The other one that was very interesting was, and I think we used this, the seamless pathway for career exploration around education. So starting at a younger age, starting out middle school, exposing our children to potential career pathways. Not everybody's going to go to college, so creating that easy to navigate career exploration starting at younger ages. Another one that we thought was very interesting was around the caregiver and family support, overcoming the generational barriers as well. Oftentimes, it's a grandparent in the home that's raising the children or overseeing the children, supervising the children, or there's extended family. So the generational barriers was another very interesting takeaway that we heard that day. And again, social media definitely was the other big key. There's a whole other layer now of complexity with our children. So those were our key findings. Was there any we were keeping this super short, and we're going to open it up to questions.
Thank you. Questions? Pat, or Dr. Hart,
Nice job.
or Aaron, or Cheryl, do you have any questions?
No.
Okay. All right.
I have.
Dr. Conner, again.
When you were discussing parent participation, what were the topics of how that looked and how you would even measure an increased rate and what qualifies as good parental participation?
What we were hearing from the feedback was an increase in parental participation with teachers. So probably the number of teacher meetings as well as parents, the parent engagement, not just school but also providers as well. So parent participation with teachers and providers is what we heard. It was repeated over and over again from some of the.
So, thank you, Bardella, and is it Leslie? Yeah, thank you for the presentation and for our two board members. I guess where I am on this is it seems like we have this page 180 is key findings kind of summarized on one page. And it would seem that we should maybe direct our executive director to take that page along with all the data and maybe come up with some recommendations to bring back to our next meeting, which would be kind of an abbreviated RFP similar to what we talked about with the other kids. I don't know the right dollar amount. I don't know the entities that are providing these types of services regarding mental health, education, safety, and support, which is our health, education, safety, and support. But it seems like we should take what we've learned, ask our director to kind of come up with some thoughts and ideas and bring it back to us. I know
Is a month enough time, Colin?
I'm not sure if we'll have an RFP in our hand next month, but we can come up with specific recommendations on what one might look like. There's a lot of different categories. I don't know if mashing them all into one RFP would make sense. For example, when Barzella talks about mental health and the full spectrum, that's therapy, but also what we talked about in our conceptual framework is also a form of mental health on the tier 1 end. So you can get, the kind of social supports you need in after-school programs and things like kind of a tier 1 for everybody. So.
Yeah, I mean, my initial thought was that we would try to stay focused on, say, mental health, and then I read the safety key findings, and I thought, the judge is gonna want us focused right there, and I get that, and so I don't, if you try to do it all, you don't do any of it well, and so I'm also okay with focusing this first year on safety, or on safety and mental health, and asking the executive director to kind of bring us back some recommendations on an abbreviated RFP that we can put out on the street to see kind of what we got.
I think that with both of those, to Colin's point, they're on a continuum, right? There's a lot of need for prevention kinds of activities that help build resilience, that help prevent future issues, and that's where you want to start with that social emotional development, social emotional learning that we've talked about starting very early on. And then you've got kids that are already at risk, they're showing some signs, they're showing some stresses, and what you want to do is mitigate, and that's a different level of prevention activity. It's a much more intensive focus, trained skills that help address things like, what do you do when you're anxious? How do you mitigate that? And then you've got the treatment needs for people who already have a diagnostic issue. And so those are three very different levels of intervention. Now, what's interesting is that those early level prevention activities mitigate some of the later risk for the safety issues. So I think we might want to think about it in terms of prevention to intervention to treatment in that continuum, and say, do we want to think about funding some things at each of those levels? But that's not a summer RFP. Those are ongoing, programmatic, and maybe better thought of, not as a summer program, but as part of a longer-term RFP, what we were thinking about putting out later this year, to put out what are the innovative strategies. And some of them, frankly, are innovative funding strategies that make much of the work more practical than the traditional funders do.
Well, of course, thank you, Mr. Chair. Of course, there's still a concern about the need for programs for the older youth.
For summer.
Right, for the summer. I don't think we're going to be able to hit all of these key points in 1 or 5 or 10 programs, but maybe scholarships could be made available for the older youth so they can participate in existing programs. Because again, we have so many youth between 9th and 12th grade who can't participate in the programs because they don't have the funds, they don't have the transportation, but they need to do something with their time. Because unfortunately, I'm sure you'll see a correlation between the idle time and the increase in the delinquency rates. And of course, as you all know, and you're reading in the paper, we just have such an uptick in gun violence. That came out in the meeting. I had a discussion this morning, another gun case. It's becoming much too common.
And that's a good camp age, that group.
Right, that's a great camp age, so.
There's no sense in reinventing the wheel. The city did the summer heat program.
Right.
That was very successful, so I don't know if it's still going on, but if it isn't, you know, maybe something along those lines can be implemented, you know, so that we can get some kids involved. Because I don't see any of the things that we're discussing right now as being a summer program. These are big deals, mental health, you know, and the one that I think is key to this is how do we help parents with the knowledge and information that they need, you know, to be even better parents. Because I think that goes a lot way to, you know, maybe it helps in the cyberbullying, you know, that they can monitor what's on the internet, and if the child is recognizing that there's something going on, you know, so I think that one is right up there with the other two.
So I would move that the executive director take the key findings from this report and reach out to existing programs around the community to see how we can increase the capacity that currently exists for this summer, and bring back to the board a proposal for sponsoring, subsidizing, or expanding some of these for the.
Okay, is that for mental health, or is that for just to keep them occupied?
I think you're talking just summer activity.
Summer activities, I think.
Yeah. Okay, so that's what you're looking for, not this report so much.
Is
No, I'm
there
talking about
any,
like for this one.
Right, for summer, like expanding summer heat.
Okay, all right.
Summer heat, summer tutoring, summer, because I've had 2 programs that call and say, y'all aren't doing anything for 9th to 12th graders? So their part is they're wanting to focus on coding, some academic enrichment. They've hired a counselor that's part of their school year program that they would like to try to extend. It's been a big hit. But just let them come and present something to Colin that they could do in the summer, but right.
Yes, Tom.
We just need to add on a second scope of service to this RFP and just say, what do you do for 9th to 12th graders?
I think so.
It'll just combine it into one, so one is our K to 8 and this.
I think that makes sense.
Okay.
So do we need to add funding in order to make that happen? I would,
Well, he'll come back.
We'll just bring back what we get.
Right, so, but-
How much you want to fund.
Yeah.
I think at this
Okay.
point, 'cause I have no idea.
Okay, so do you want a separate motion, or you just, because we need to incorporate that even in some, needs to be some sort of.
Ken, do you want to,
I'll just add to my motion that we expand the previous RFP to add a second scope of services for the older kids.
this should be your second.
Just,
Where's my section?
for us,
All right, you had a motion, second?
Yes.
Okay, I have a
Tina?
motion, second. Any discussion, from the, people on Zoom, the board members on Zoom?
No, I agree.
I don't see, okay, I don't see any hands, but I don't see any people either.
I think Pat had a hand, was waving.
I think she said it was good.
I'm
Pat,
sorry,
did you
I said I was good. Yes, thanks, sorry.
Member Hart?
Dr. Hart? She's good, okay, all right. All right, open it up to the public, for any comments on the motion, which is to look into, authorize the chair to,
Sure,
Executive
feel free.
Colin to go and look to see what's out there and come back at the next meeting with ideas.
Expand our scope of services on our.
Addison Staples?
Ms. Staples?
Mister.
She'll say.
Oh, I thought you said Miss Staples.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. Yeah, thank you for taking my comment. I wanted to maybe bring a few questions maybe regarding the RFP and how the funding is being distributed. I see that there are scholarships, partial or full. However, what is the advice for programs that do not charge enrollment for their programs? How do you suggest and where is the guidance in this RFP to guide how programs such as those, if we are targeting or wanting to serve low-income families, some of the programs are in that category. And I don't see any guidance in that RFP how to come up with that number. And then secondly, I guess if there was a rationale on if we are adding 9th through 12th, and then, you know, where the rationale for the number of funding allocated was derived from. And so I'm just wondering how many kids are we looking to do, you know, serve with this funding amount? And if we're adding it, does that decrease it? And then lastly, I guess would be the timing. If the suggestion is to come back in April for funding suggestions through 9th through 12th, the programs that are in planning process now, I feel there is a very, very, very short time turnaround to plan accordingly, advertise, register, and sign up when, you know, some programs that rely on funding entirely to run their summer program, which I hear is some of the goals of some of this funding. How would we be able to plan accordingly with such a short turnaround? Thank you so much.
Addison, as far as the funding is concerned, the funding for the high schoolers has not been determined. Colin will come back with some sort of ballpark figure at the next meeting. As far as it affecting the $500,000 that is on the table now, it'll be independent of that. And there is a potential, because I don't think you must have heard the first part of the meeting, there is a potential for him to come back if the demand is great enough for a larger number, but that will be determined when the amount of applications come in. As far as the time scope, Addison, all I can do is apologize to you. You know, as far as this is a learning process, and what we were gearing for initially was from from kindergarten to 8th grade, and through this discussion, we have decided to expand it. And you're right, whatever we come up with is going to be on a limited time scale. However, we're trying to do something, and in all these cases, it's for 1 year only. And we're going to learn this year, and next year we will be much more. We will be much earlier in the scale as far as how this goes, so that there will be ample opportunity for people to apply and have all the bugs worked out. But if, you know, you're right. I don't see that this is it's going to cramp the amount of services offered, because there's going to be a limited time frame. But there should be something this summer, and next year we'll do better. So and if any of the other board members wants to chime in on that, feel free to do so. But I think that I will apologize, because this was not on the radar till today.
And Addison, as to your question about the levels of income and the scholarships, that's probably a great question to bring to the bidders conference. When you see the RFP come out, make sure you go to the bidders conference.
Okay, I heard some names, so I have more questions.
We have Sherry Kitchen saying that there is a significant connection between adverse childhood experiences and mental health in children and adults. Cheryl Twombly would like to say, regarding the discussion on NH support for kids, we have to always keep in mind that a child that is in crisis usually also has a family experiencing crisis. Caregivers and family supports need to be built into mental health supports for kids. Jasmine Copeland says, amazing presentation. Christy Arrington says, can scholarship be defined? Does it cover the fees typically incurred for a family, or does it cover the cost of participation? Those can be different, especially if the program is not fee-based.
We'll give that one to you.
Just change the word scholarship to slot. It's up to the agency to figure out their cost of service and the number of kids and divide that by a cost per child. I think we did per week. I need to look at the thing. So that's up to them to figure out. So just change the word scholarship to slot. Some places that are free will know, they should know their cost per child per day because they're probably getting they maybe get school readiness for it or something, or some places do charge parents a weekly fee, and I would expect that they use that number. So if you're normally a free program, you'll just have to do the calculation into a slot amount. And I think we're doing it per child per week, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's up to them to calculate.
Okay. Is that it?
I want to make sure we understand the motion before you vote, the direction to the staff.
So you want it explained by Kim
Well,
a bit more?
I heard two separate things, that's why, I think what I had suggested was we just add on to this current RFP.
Mm-hmm.
And so that people would apply, instead of K to 8 applying, K to 12 would apply. And what I wanted to know is, I guess this was Commissioner Cornell's motion originally, is that right? Are we constrained to the 4 categories, or what was your intent?
My intent was to take the findings that we just heard and incorporate those into your evaluation by.
Okay. So the findings were, this is mental.
You can change my mind too, I mean, what do
Well,
you need?
So the mental health is like a year.
It's not a
Yes,
science.
I think I would prefer to stick with the categories.
I would.
Because the categories hit all of these, so if
Yeah, I mean, my intent was to provide additional capacity to existing programs that are currently working.
Okay,
And so if they could hit those 4 categories or any of those categories, then that would give us that flexibility.
So it's from kindergarten to 12th grade.
Yeah, I think that's,
okay, understood, thank you.
Okay, so, in this case, he doesn't have to contact the city of Gainesville for the summer heat program.
Maybe just to ask them to apply.
right.
With additional funding, how can you expand the
Yeah,
program?
they would be eligible.
Yeah.
I don't know if the program still exists, but.
I did last
But I think the initial request too was to take these findings, which are very helpful, and, those have been provided to, the executive director, and that you at some point in your team could come back and present something, to the
Judge,
board
I
at
think
another
that's-
time. That's a different time frame.
that's
Different
separate.
time frame, no, that's right,
Yeah.
I just wanna make sure that we
Yeah.
don't lose sight of that either.
Well, and I don't want to, so
Okay.
I would hope that you would make a motion
Okay.
that's totally independent of
Okay.
that one, that would say, please give these findings,
You needed to know. Okay.
to the executive director and allow him to do the research, and I would imagine it's probably gonna take more than a month.
So I got part 2 of my motion, that he takes the findings and brings back to the something.
Yeah, and that is gonna be, I think that's the kind of programming that we've got with the 0 to 5. It's gonna have to be that kind of program, multi-year, an investment in, because that's not a 1-year deal.
Well,
Certainly not a summer deal.
Well, what we're hoping is perhaps next year during the RFP process is that it will be a multi-year RFP.
That'd be good.
There, no further discussion, we have a 2-part motion to add to, high school to the original motion, and for Colin to come back with some more information based on the excellent presentation given today.
Thumbs up.
Okay, all those in favor? Say
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion is unanimous.
Okay, next item would be, informational items. I don't really think unless Colin wants to, elaborate on anything.
No, but I'd like to give Ms. Certain an opportunity to make a motion, have it voted on that she was gonna do earlier. There's one issue I would like to address, and this is this issue of tutoring. We have, I think about 7 programs that offer, on the old RFP, that offer some sort of tutoring on a school schedule. And, some of them are in danger of running out of funds in the middle of the school year, which I just think is not right. So I would like the authority to move money around or add up to, and I'm gonna suggest $50,000, to make sure that those 6 or 7 programs, if they need it, can continue. And we will come back to the board and let you know which ones we gave extra funding to, or if we need to any. But in the middle of the school year in this environment, I don't really want.
Does anybody have a problem with that?
I do not. I make a motion that we do that.
Okay.
I would second Maggie's motion.
We have a second, any discussion? Any public discussion?
I follow directions, Will.
On occasion.
Ashley?
But, Kenneth King is having trouble getting through. Can you give a minute to see if we can get her on the line?
We have 5 minutes, and we get 6 o'clock tomorrow.
Yes, sir.
Otherwise, I get crap from somebody to my right. The goat cheese.
You need to take him to goat herding.
I know, I did, yeah. I did it when we actually do something.
Don't minimize it. It's getting everything close.
If he didn't win, he's gonna minimize it.
I did it,
We had to climb
Yeah, right.
uphill.
Oh, tell me this in a minute.
Okay.
I'm sure it's been a minute.
Okay, all right, all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion unanimous.
Aye.
Okay, all right, Penny, did you want to offer some sort of motion?
Oh, no, that's it. That takes care of it there. We got our summer programming, we got our high school is taken care of,
What else are you doing?
huh?
Good for the day?
I think I'm good for the day. I'll call Colin when I get home. Yeah, I forgot to say this.
Okay, you want to add anything else? Otherwise, I'll just tell us when the next meetings are. Okay, bidders conference is Thursday, March 11th. Application training is Thursday, March 11th. Our next regular meeting will be April the 12th. And I guess, at this point, general comments from the public.
Let me see if I can get,
Not do that one thing. With the vaccinations coming, right now, you know, with the COVID and the way the board is, we have people that are able not to come. Once we get the vaccinations, I kind of think that people ought to be here. You know, when we're vaccinated, for those that can be vaccinated, that after that, they really would be, I think there's something lost doing it too soon. But y'all can agree, not agree. And it's especially for y'all, Dr. Hart and Pat and Karen and Cheryl.
My sense on that, Lee, is I think we're a couple of months away, but I think by, May, I think we'll be in a place where most folks that want a vaccine will have access.
Right, and that's what I'm saying,
And the county has had that kind of discussion, that once there's access and availability, then county staff also, you know, we're gonna kind of change the format. So I would say if we can hold out until that happens, by May.
Okay. Okay.
I just worried that at some point, we're not gonna have 6 of us who are able to be here out of this group of 6, and that will really create a challenge for, especially given everything we're actually doing now and things that have to be voted on.
I've indicated to Colin that I plan to hopefully be there for the April meeting, so, and beyond.
Well, we look forward to seeing you, Pat.
Good to see you.
Anything else? I mean, there are other people that are affected by this, so. Okay, all right. So, we'll look in the next few months to everybody being in attendance at the meeting, so. All right, if there's nothing else for the good of the order, this meeting is adjourned.
Well, Chair, well done.
We did it.